Have you ever wondered why, despite a literal mountain of evidence showing that remote work is highly effective, so many companies are just aggressively forcing people back into the office?
Yeah, it's everywhere right now.
Right. Like you read the headlines, and sometimes they're even threatening to fire employees if they don't comply. It's wild. So welcome to this deep dive into the hidden psychological motives behind return to office mandates.
It's a really fascinating topic.
It really is. Today, we are looking at a super compelling piece of research by Dr. Jonathan H. Westover. It's titled Ego at the Office: How Narcissism Resists Remote Work.
Which is such a provocative title, honestly.
Oh, absolutely. And the mission of our deep dive today is to unpack the real, often unspoken reasons that some leaders just seem to fundamentally reject remote work. Because according to the research, it isn't actually about the technology.
No, not at all.
It's not even about the bottom line, which is what you'd think, right? It revolves entirely around ego, power, and status.
Okay, let's unpack this because the current post-pandemic reality is just a fascinating battleground. It really is a battleground.
Right now, remote work accounts for about 25% of paid work hours in the U.S. And that is obviously down from the pandemic peak, which was around, what, 60%?
Yeah, right around 60%.
But is still massively up from the pre-2020 norm, which was less than 5%.
Mm-hmm.
So the landscape of how we work has fundamentally changed, but the battle over that physical office space is somehow still raging.
It is a very active debate. And to truly understand the dynamics of this battle, we really have to look at the historical context the research provides.
Right.
Because a few years ago, when we heard leaders pushing back against remote work, the primary excuses were structural.
Like productivity drops, right?
Exactly. We heard concerns about a lack of productivity or claims that the technology just wasn't robust enough to support complex virtual collaboration. But as the data shows, those specific excuses are wearing incredibly thin today.
Because the tech is just so good now.
Yeah, the technological barriers are practically non-existent. Organizations have highly sophisticated platforms for video, async communication, project management, you name it.
Yeah, we have all the tools.
Which sets up the central mystery the research tries to solve. If the tools are functionally perfect and the actual work is getting done, what is driving this desperation to get everyone back under one roof?
Right, and before we dive into the psychological profiles of these leaders, we really need to establish just how baffling these return to office or RTO mandates actually are from a purely operational perspective.
Oh, they are completely baffling.
Because when you look at the raw data provided in the sources, the business case for forcing everyone back just doesn't seem to add up at all.
No, it doesn't. The empirical evidence is quite striking here. When researchers analyze multiple studies, and this includes both experimental research and large-scale archival analyses of Fortune 500 companies, remote and hybrid work arrangements consistently maintain performance.
Maintain, and sometimes even boost it, right?
Yes, in numerous instances, they actually improve employee performance. But the critical takeaway from the data isn't just about the productivity, it's about the collateral damage.
The fallout from forcing people back.
Exactly. Rigid return to office mandates actively harm organizations by causing severe talent attrition. And it isn't an even spread of turnover.
Who is leaving, mostly?
The data shows it disproportionately drives away senior, high-performing employees. These are the highly skilled individuals who have the market leverage to simply say, no thanks, hand in their resignation, and just find a competitor that offers the flexibility they've grown accustomed to.
Wow. And taking that a step further, the research also highlights how these mandates reverse a lot of recent corporate progress. Like remote work drastically expanded the talent pool over the last few years.
It really did.
It opened doors for working parents, individuals with disabilities, and people who just don't happen to live within a 50-mile radius of a really expensive city center.
Yeah, it was a huge win for diversity.
Exactly. Mandating a return to the office effectively shuts those doors again, narrowing the talent pool. And meanwhile, the employees who do return are suddenly hit with massive financial and time burdens from commuting, which just heavily impacts their work-life balance.
It's a huge step backward for employee well-being.
But let me play devil's advocate for a second here.
Sure, go for it.
Surely a CEO of a Fortune 500 company cares about the bottom line more than anything else, right? Like if the data so clearly shows that hybrid work improves retention without hurting performance, why would an executive willingly bleed their top engineering or financial talent?
It seems totally counterintuitive.
Are they really just misinformed, or is there a genuine, understandable fear of operational collapse?
Well, it is a logical question to ask, but the research specifically investigates that angle and finds that operational fear just doesn't explain the persistence of the mandates across the board.
Because they had the data themselves.
Right, these leaders have access to their own internal productivity data. They know the numbers. The resistance to remote work, according to the study, is largely a discretionary policy choice.
Interesting.
And the data suggests this choice is shaped heavily by leadership preferences that are specifically rooted in a psychological personality trait, which is narcissism.
Okay, so if I'm tracking with this, the anxiety over remote work isn't always about the work itself. We are officially pivoting from operational motives to psychological ones.
That is the core argument of the paper, yeah. To understand this dynamic, the research introduces what organizational psychologists call the extended agency model of narcissistic leaders.
Okay, what does that mean in plain English?
Basically, this is a self-regulatory psychological system. In this model, a leader's actions are heavily devoted to enhancing their own self-esteem, asserting dominance, and securing what psychoanalysts refer to as narcissistic supply.
Narcissistic supply, so like attention.
Exactly. Narcissistic supply is the constant attention, affirmation, and admiration a person requires to maintain their internal sense of superiority and importance.
So they essentially need a physical audience to feed the ego, like a subtle nod in the hallway or someone rushing to open a door for them or, the hushed silence when they walk into a conference room.
Precisely. And the research explains this mechanism through what's called media richness theory.
Oh, I've heard of this.
Yeah, so communication channels vary drastically in how much social and emotional information they can convey. In-person work is categorized as a rich medium.
Because you get all the nonverbal cues.
Right. In a physical office environment, leaders can read very subtle facial expressions. They can use their physical posture to dominate a room, and they can immediately bask in the visible deference of their subordinates.
And virtual work is the opposite of that.
Exactly. Virtual work is categorized as a lean medium. The communication is often delayed, it's constrained by technology, and it's just socially ambiguous.
It makes me think of like an actor who thrives on the energy of a live Broadway audience, right?
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Imagine they are suddenly told they have to perform their big, emotional, sweeping monologue to a webcam in a completely empty room. The immediate applause, the gasps, the energy of the crowd, it's just gone.
The feedback loop is totally broken.
Exactly. And think about the mechanics of a video call. On a standard Zoom grid, everyone is just an equal-sized box on a screen. The CEO of a multinational corporation occupies the exact same amount of visual real estate as the summer intern who just started on Monday.
What's fascinating here is how that exact visual flattening completely disrupts the corporate hierarchy.
It levels the playing field.
It does. It systematically strips away a leader's traditional physical tools of dominance. And the research actually divides this psychological threat into two distinct categories.
Okay, what are they?
The loss of power and the loss of status.
Okay, so when you flatten that visual hierarchy on a screen, the most immediate casualty for a narcissistic leader seems to be their physical authority. Let's look at that first category of power. How does the research differentiate power in this specific context?
Well, power motivation is fundamentally about control. Specifically, the real-time authority over other people's actions.
That's micromanaging.
Yes. In a traditional office setting, narcissistic leaders exercise power through spontaneous physical dominance. That might mean being the loudest voice in a meeting or using intense, lingering eye contact to intimidate people.
Or just hovering over someone's desk.
Exactly. Engaging in what's known as management by walking around. It is all about spontaneous drop-ins. They want immediate physical access to subordinates, to issue commands, monitor activity, and just feel the friction of their own authority in real time.
And remote work just completely breaks that physical feedback loop.
It shatters it. Remote work introduces a high degree of uncertainty. Employees can turn off their cameras during a meeting. They might delay responding to a message or an email for 20 minutes while they finish a task.
Because they're actually working.
Right. They manage the minutia of their own daily schedules. And to a secure, results-oriented leader, that is simply operational autonomy.
It's a good thing.
But the research suggests that to a highly narcissistic leader, those minor delays and the lack of immediate physical access are internally interpreted as insubordination.
Oh, wow. So they take it personally.
Very personally. It registers as a direct personal threat to their authority.
The source material actually gives some really striking real-world examples to illustrate how this plays out. Like Cisco Systems is one that stood out early in the debates.
Yes, looking at Cisco's early return to office transition provides a really great case study. Top leadership was initially trying to maintain flexibility, but internal reports revealed heavy resistance from middle managers.
And it wasn't about the work not getting done right.
No, when researchers looked at why, it wasn't due to plummeting productivity metrics at all. The managers explicitly cited feeling a loss of management presence.
Management presence.
Yeah. They couldn't physically monitor their teams by pacing the floor. It was a clear anxiety over diminished control, but it was disguised as a concern for the workflow.
We see a very similar pattern with Wells Fargo. CEO Charles Scharf mandated a strict return to the office, and the official company messaging was heavily focused on, collaboration and mentorship.
Which sound like great things.
They do. But the employees who ended up departing painted a completely different picture. In their exit interviews, they cited feeling deeply distrusted and constantly micromanaged.
Right. The actions didn't match the messaging.
Exactly. The company possessed excellent remote technology, so the argument that they lacked the tools to collaborate virtually simply didn't hold up to scrutiny.
And Amazon offers perhaps one of the most highly visible examples of this dynamic. Under Andy Jassy, Amazon instituted a strict on-site mandate.
5 days a week, right?
Yes. And the official rationale was, predictably, about preserving company culture and sparking serendipitous innovation. But the workforce widely interpreted the move as a top-down reassertion of executive power.
Especially after they had been working fine remotely for so long.
Exactly. After a long period where employees had successfully managed their own autonomy, the result aligned perfectly with what the research predicts, which was massive pushback and significant attrition.
Especially among the people who could easily leave.
Right, particularly among senior engineers who possess the leverage to easily find remote work somewhere else.
Here's where it gets really interesting. These executives almost never come out and just say, hey, I need to physically control your time to feel like a boss.
No, they would never say that out loud.
Right. They actively disguise their need for dominance using universally accepted positive corporate buzzwords. They champion collaboration or mentorship or serendipitous innovation when the underlying mechanism, according to the research, is often just a desperate desire to restore the physical hierarchy.
The data strongly suggests that terminology is frequently used as a very palatable cover for control, and that perfectly transitions into the second major category of narcissistic motivation, which is status.
Okay, so how is status different from power here?
Well, if power is about the mechanics of controlling others, status is about how the leader is perceived and revered by others.
So if power is the ability to give a command, status is the admiration, the social standing, the feeling of being the undisputed big shot in the room.
Correct. Individuals with high narcissistic traits vigilantly monitor social cues for signs of respect and deference. They rely heavily on the physical markers of their importance.
Like the corner office.
Exactly. Sitting at the literal head of a large mahogany conference table, wearing distinctive expensive attire, occupying that massive corner office with a view, and having the ability to give an inspiring speech and physically feel a room of hundreds of people hanging on their every word.
And Zoom just kills all of that.
Virtual work neutralizes almost all of those markers. As you mentioned with the video grid analogy earlier, a low-resolution video feed completely democratizes the visual field.
Everyone's just a square.
Yeah. Flattering lighting, expensive suits, and a commanding physical height just do not translate over a web camera. The status signals are completely lost in transmission.
The examples in the research illustrating this status anxiety are really telling too. Take Salesforce, for instance.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, Mark Benioff is famous in the industry for a very charismatic, energetic, almost theatrical stage presence. During the initial remote push, Salesforce actually embraced flexibility. But eventually, Benioff started pushing very hard for an on-site Ohana culture.
Ohana.
Yeah, which is their corporate term for a close-knit family environment. Yeah. The analysis suggests he was likely feeling the absence of the direct in-person admiration and that grand stage presence that historically fueled his particular brand of executive status.
We can observe a very similar dynamic at JPMorgan Chase. CEO Jamie Dimon has been a very vocal, uncompromising advocate for returning to the office.
Very vocal.
He has repeatedly argued that remote work is inherently inferior for building corporate culture. But if you analyze his traditional leadership style, he is famous for high visibility.
Walking the trading floors, right?
Yes, walking the bustling trading floors, engaging directly, and being seen as the ultimate authority figure in a highly charged environment.
He frequently cites intangibles, like the energy of the office.
He does. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the research posits that when a leader vaguely argues for the energy or the magic of the office, they are frequently describing the specific social dynamics and hierarchies that feed their own ego.
Wow, that makes so much sense.
Right. The energy of walking a packed trading floor is, functionally speaking, the energy of receiving visible deference and immediate attention from hundreds of subordinates simultaneously.
And then there's Goldman Sachs. CEO David Solomon literally referred to remote work as an aberration that urgently needed to be corrected.
Which aligns perfectly with the mechanics of status motivation. I mean, Goldman Sachs's entire corporate identity and brand are built on elite, exclusive Wall Street prestige.
It's all about who's in the club.
Exactly. Remote work, by its very nature, democratizes access. It flattens the signals of who is elite, who is in the inner circle, and who isn't.
So it's a threat.
A massive threat. Therefore, for a leader at the top of that specific hierarchy, remote work isn't viewed merely as a logistical challenge. It is perceived as a direct existential threat to the elite status identity that the company and the leader relies upon.
Okay, so we've thoroughly diagnosed the problem here. The research makes a really compelling case that power and status motivations, driven by underlying narcissistic traits, are heavily fueling these rigid mandates.
The evidence is certainly there.
But knowing the root cause isn't enough, right? This deep dive wouldn't be complete without exploring the solutions. How do healthy, highly functional organizations actually navigate this ego trap without losing all their best people?
The paper outlines several evidence-based strategies that organizations can use to manage and mitigate ego in the workplace. These solutions generally center around communication frameworks, shifting trust metrics, redefining autonomy, data-driven policymaking, and structural culture changes.
Let's break down communication first.
Sure. So, to neutralize the loudest, most dominant voice in the room, companies must implement structured communication protocols. This means enforcing structured turn-taking in virtual meetings so one person cannot just monopolize the airtime.
And using async tools more.
Yes, leaning much more heavily on asynchronous tools like shared working documents.
Because asynchronous communication essentially starves the narcissistic supply chain.
It really does.
Like, when ideas are submitted in a shared Google Doc, a leader can't use a booming voice or physical height or intense eye contact to force a consensus. The idea has to survive purely on its own merit, completely detached from the ego or the physical presence of the person who suggested it.
That is the exact mechanism at play. Microsoft, under the leadership of Satya Nadella, is highlighted as a prime example of doing this well.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Nadella's leadership philosophy heavily emphasizes empathy, which inherently moderates narcissistic top-down tendencies. Microsoft utilizes structured feedback loops and asynchronous collaboration to build a genuinely hybrid model where the loudest voice doesn't automatically dictate the direction of the team.
That structural change also naturally addresses the trust issue, I'd imagine. So many leaders justify RTO mandates by implying they simply don't trust their employees to actually work when they are sitting at home in their sweatpants.
But the research argues that this trust deficit is usually a symptom of the leader's own anxiety over losing control.
Rather than the employee actually slacking off.
Exactly, rather than a reflection of the employee's actual work ethic. The structural solution is shifting the management paradigm from monitoring hours to measuring outcomes.
Show your work, basically.
Right. Dropbox is a fascinating case study here. They adopted what they call a virtual-first model. To make it work, they rely heavily on asynchronous tools and incredibly clear, transparent goal-setting frameworks.
So everyone knows exactly what's expected of them.
Yes, they actively train and empower their managers with the skills to measure tangible results and deliverables, completely removing the need to physically micromanage or monitor their team's daily hours.
I really appreciate how the research addresses the concept of autonomy, too. It suggests reframing remote work as a competitive advantage rather than viewing it as a loss of executive control.
That reframe is crucial.
Right. Like Shopify CEO Toby Lütke took a very definitive stance early on, declaring that office centricity is over.
A bold statement.
Very bold. He framed remote work explicitly as a strategic way to access the absolute best global talent available. By shifting the goalpost, he completely sidestepped the ego trap, He made a narrative about global market domination instead of maintaining physical domination over a local office space in Toronto or wherever.
The way policies are designed also plays a crucial role in avoiding that trap. The most effective antidote to a single leader's ego-dictating terms is inclusive, aggressively data-driven design.
Data over feelings.
Always. Look at Atlassian. They developed their Team Anywhere policy not by executive decree, but through massive, widespread employee consultation and rigorous analysis of pilot program data.
So they couldn't argue with the results.
Exactly. When an organization has mountains of internal data proving that flexible, autonomous work is succeeding and popular, it makes it nearly impossible for a single narcissistic leader to push back and demand an office return based purely on their own vague preferences. The data just removes the ambiguity that ego usually exploits.
It really seems to boil down to building a culture of humility and distributed power from the ground up. The sources point to companies like Patagonia, where humility and employee well-being are deeply embedded core values.
All right.
Or Basecamp, which champions highly transparent decision-making processes. Or GitLab, which famously operates on an all-remote handbook that literally bakes flexibility and asynchronous work into the company's DNA from day one.
They built it into the foundation.
They really did. You know, think about your own job for a second. Think about the underlying mechanics of how your workplace actually measures your success.
It's an important reflection.
Are you judged by the tangible, objective results you deliver to the company? Or is your value subtly tied to how often your boss physically sees you sitting at your desk looking busy and available?
That distinction is the ultimate litmus test for corporate culture. When organizations successfully embed flexibility and outcome-based measurement as core cultural values, it becomes exceedingly difficult for individual leaders to oppose those practices without looking entirely out of touch with the company's established identity and the empirical data.
So what does this all mean for the future of how we work? Synthesizing everything we've covered today, the physical office shouldn't just be an expensive theater built exclusively to supply an executive with a captive audience.
Definitely not.
When leadership cites vague, unquantifiable terms like culture or serendipity as the primary reason to force you into a 2-hour daily commute, the research suggests that organizations need to start demanding hard empirical data. We have to look past the buzzwords and ensure we aren't just accepting self-serving psychological motives disguised as essential business strategy.
The data firmly supports that conclusion. The future of work is not merely a technological puzzle that we have already solved with better software.
Right, the software is fine.
The software is great, the future of work is deeply human, and it is highly political. Going forward, the research warns that companies must proactively assess traits like humility and narcissism in their leadership during hiring and promotion processes.
Catch it early.
Yes, because if organizations ignore this psychological dynamic, they risk continuing to bleed their absolute best talent simply to satisfy the ego-driven preferences of a few key executives. This raises an important question about how we fundamentally define and measure effective leadership in a modern, distributed era.
It really does challenge the traditional archetype of the corporate boss.
Yeah.
And I want to leave you with a final thought to chew on as we wrap up. Think back to our Broadway actor performing to the empty room.
Yeah, the monologue to the webcam.
Right. If the ultimate measure of a truly great leader is how effectively, efficiently, and autonomously their team performs when that leader is not physically in the room.
Which is what real leadership is.
Exactly. What does a desperate, rigid mandate demanding that everyone return to the office really say about that leader's internal confidence in their own leadership abilities?
The psychology suggests it says quite a lot.
It really does. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. See you next time.